narcissistic traits. This is so popular, right, all over the internet right now, the narcissist. And in the Enneagram, we work with narcissism or narcissistic traits is someone who has been wounded. There's definitely developmental wounding that happened in childhood. The debate is out, and I just want everybody to know I'm not a psychotherapist or I'm not a psychologist. I'm an Enneagram specialist, but in our way of looking at it, there's wounding in childhood, and there's probably some temperamental fragility that highlighted the way the person wounded. A temperamental fragility of some kind mixed with an environment that was traumatizing, and you end up with a narcissistically organized defense system. So the way the person defended itself from the pain it was suffering in childhood, early childhood, is a narcissistic defense system.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Nourished Inside Out. I am here with Suzanne today, and she is an Enneagram author, teacher, and coach. Thank you so much for joining us today, Suzanne.
Thank you for having me. It's an honor to be here with you.
Absolutely. Do you mind telling us a little bit about your background and how you became specialized in Enneagrams?
Yeah, thank you. This thing called the Enneagram, it's kind of a unique name. Ennea means 9 in Greek, and gramma means drawing. And it actually reflects this 9-pointed sacred geometric symbol that the symbol is very ancient. It goes way back in time. It tells us about how energy works in the universe. It actually highlights cosmic law, just about how things manifest, how energy is created. That's quite an abstract thought. But what happened is, over time, they started mapping this symbol to the way human personality organizes itself. Just like every other system in our concrete world, systems make everything happen. Systems make life. Systems make relationships. Systems build community. And systems also organize our personality. So the Enneagram points right at this. So basically, the Enneagram is a way of understanding human personality, how it develops, how it organizes itself, and actually how we can work with our personality to become less and less limited by the personality, more free, more liberated, more response flexible, meaning, do I always get angry at the same thing every time over and over again? Or actually, do I have a little bit of choice to work with my particular personality, what triggers me, the way I defend, and really how am I in relationship with myself and other people? So the Enneagram is a system of personality to help us not only understand ourselves, but to grow into our fullest potential. It's a development model to understand how we develop, but it's also a personal development and growth and expansion model of how we can become a greater part of ourselves and a greater who we are, to potentiate who we really are. So when I say that, none of us realizes that we're not at our full potential, right? What does that mean? We all have ways that we react to things. We have ways we react under stress. We have ways we feel really insecure. We have ways that we're afraid that we won't be loved. All of these things start to create limitations rather than potential. So if I always get mad at the same thing over and over again, that starts to become a habit. It starts to become a pattern. And maybe it's a pattern that is affecting my working life. Maybe it's a pattern that's wrecking my relationship. Maybe it's a pattern that's harming my kids. Maybe it's a pattern of limiting others in my presence. Like, all of those things don't help us become our fullest potential. So the Enneagram helps us to see that, to look at it without shame, and to give us permission to look at how we react, how we think, how we feel. Gives us a kind of a non-judgmental way to look at those things so we can grow. That's what the Enneagram is.
Thank you for sharing that. I like how you talk about the Enneagram and how it goes into the different types of personalities, and it helps us understand ourselves or the people around us better. Can you go into the different types of personalities on the Enneagram scale?
I didn't even know the Enneagram existed. It came out of like sort of mystical circles in the 1960s in the human potential movement, even though the symbol itself is very ancient. I came across it completely by accident. And the first thing that happened was I started to see myself in it, because there are 9 actual personality temperaments that keep repeating themselves across all of humanity. I found my structural design, I'm going to call it for a second. I found my particular pattern of development, the way that I self organize, the way my system organizes. And I'll tell you, once I saw that, I was like, oh my God, that's why I do that. That's why I feel that way every time this happens outside in the world. The compassion for myself began. That was the first time I had compassion for myself, and also the compassion for others started. And I started to realize that we're actually different. These 9 patterns of personality are different one from the other. We have a different way of focusing our attention, meaning the way I put my attention on something in the external world and the way I put attention on things inside of me is quite specific to these different temperamental types. And that really helped me understand why somebody else in my life would see something so differently. They'd be focused on a different thing. Let's say we both show up at a party. My partner would be noticing something completely different than I would notice in the very same party. And I thought, that was so weird. You can't believe you didn't notice that all the chairs were out of order and that everything was not on the table and that people didn't know where to sit. You didn't notice that? And you go, oh no, I was noticing that person over there is really quiet and that person wasn't talking to anybody. And then everybody over here was talking. So he would notice all the relational aspects and I'm noticing all the structural parts of the party. I thought, wow, it's really weird that we would look at something so different. So to highlight these 9 different types have a different way of organizing attention. And then that organizes what we tend to think is important. And then it organizes a lot of why we argue also. I can't believe you didn't notice that. And I can't believe you didn't notice that. There are 9 temperaments. You want me to just kind of share briefly what they're about? Because it's a little bit complex, but I'll give a rough summary. There's 9 temperamental designs, meaning self-organizing structures. And structure means the way your nervous system organizes, the way your defense system and your reactions get organized, the way these big emotions in you get organized, like anger, like fear, or another emotional system called separation distress. That's when you feel disconnected from others. There's a big reaction to that. These 9 types all fall within certain patterns of the way you organize anger, you organize fear, or you organize the distress of not being connected to others. Not one of them is better than the other. They do go 1 through 9. So someone might say, I'm a type 1, or I'm a type 5, or I'm a type 8. Not that 8 is better than 1, or 1 is higher than 8. So there's no hierarchy to it. They actually go around the symbol. They are not gender specific. So a type 2 could be a male or a female. You don't change your type across your life. I get asked this all the time. Well, can I be one type when I'm young and then I grow up and I'm another type? Actually, the type is temperament. What's subcortical, meaning below your mind, below your thinking, it's subcortical. It's down in the central nervous system. And it's aspects of you that are inborn, not learned. And this is very important. We actually come in with certain propensities, certain ways of organizing ourselves under stress. That comes in when we're born. We're kind of already designed, and then we have to meet our parents, right? We meet our parents, and then we meet the school system, and then we meet society. But all of that is pushing against something that's already here. And the Enneagram gives us a lot of compassion to understand my own wiring. And I came in a certain way. That's why me and my sister are so different. She deals with mommy's anger this way, and I deal with mommy's anger that way. And it's 2 completely different reactions to the same mom. And that is something I've always found fascinating, because they used to say, how did your childhood make you who you are? Well, it shapes who you are, but there's something else in your original design that organizes who you really are at a very deep level, even though the environment that we grow up in will shape our temperament. We'll have to adapt to parents or school or teachers. We have to adapt to all those things, but we're using our temperament to do that. We'll start with type 1. It's called the perfectionist, reformer, crusader. These are people that like things a certain way, and they like things done right. And if they're not done right, they crusade or want to reform or change it. And then we have type 2. It's called the helper, the giver, the nurturer. Type 2s are always noticing what other people need and how to take care of those needs in others. And they tend to forget themselves. Type 3 is called the performer or the achiever. This is someone who's kind of got the hero energy. They want to become somebody. They've got to be successful. But it comes down to a producing type of, performing type of a person that's like, got to be on the ball, getting things done, always sees a goal in front of them, and kind of always feels like they're running out of time. So I got to get to that goal. And then we have number 4. It's called the individualist. Sometimes they call it the romantic. This is someone who has a big inner life. They want to know who they really are. They want to share what's inside of them with the outside world. They tend to have a lot of feelings. They tend to feel the feelings of others. It's almost, if you can picture, someone that the world just comes right in and it just kind of overtakes their experience of life. They have a lot of emotionality and they want to know why we're here. They're always looking for meaning and symbols and understanding. Number 5 is called the thinker, the hermit, the investigator. Sometimes they even call it the observer. Type 5s are all looking in the mind. As long as I have knowledge, I will be powerful. Knowledge is power, right? And I'm worried about the world overtaking me. But as long as I have something to offer, I've got great insights. I know a lot of things. I've studied a lot. I have something to offer society. I'll be okay. So they really lead into knowledge, learning, research. These are very astute, ascertaining types. It's the type that has to understand and figure something out and prepare in order to feel safe in the world. And then we have number 6. It's called the loyal skeptic or the loyal advocate, the troubleshooter. So type 6 is also up in the mind, but it doesn't really trust the mind. So it has to get a certainty and assurance outside the mind. And it's always looking to be certain and it's always doubting it's certain. And this is a type of person that is phenomenal at what's called future negative projection. They can see worst case scenario and they kind of shoot out into the future and figure out what could go wrong. And then they become the great prevention junkies on the whole system. This is the person that's always warning you what could go wrong, what could happen. Did you think about this? Did you think about that? Because they've thought about all of it. They're always working with prevention and getting ahead of something bad happening. That makes sense? I think we all know one of these people. My mom happens to be this type of person. And then we have type 7 on the Enneagram. It's called the epicure, the adventurer, the enthusiast. Instead of being future negative, what could go wrong? They're future positive, what could go right? And so they see all the options and possibilities. And as long as I see good things ahead of me, good things in the future, I will be fine. So this is the eternal optimist. Very playful, loves to be stimulated, has lots of possibilities and options, and tends to be moving pretty fast, always on the goal, lots of activities, doesn't like to get stuck, and doesn't like to sit still too long. And then we have type 8. It's called the challenger, the boss, the leader. Type 8 comes to teach us about strength and power, my own big power, whether it's authentic and I wield a lot of leadership, or I start using my power as a form of force and I start over controlling the environment, over controlling others. So I got to learn how to balance that. But type A comes to tell us about being truthful and being strong and not being vulnerable. They end up in leadership positions very often. And then finally, we have type 9. It's called the mediator, the harmonizer, the peacemaker. Type 9 comes to teach us about unconditional positive regard. Type 9s want union. They want to get along. Type 9s will often say, why can't everyone just be nice? They don't like conflict and they tend to bring harmony. And they can bring harmony at the cost of the self because they might be smiling when they're really angry. They won't tell you that you've just hurt their feelings. They'll just keep the peace. And that's type 9. So those are the 9, I call them structures from my wonderful colleagues who actually worked on this as temperament, worked on this as physiological, neurological, and spiritual design. It's all combined. It's not just an idea in our mind. Our whole body, our whole central nervous system is involved in the type of temperament we have and the way our attention gets focused. And on top of that, it's what our personality forms, is how our personality forms. So our personality is not random. It's incredibly intelligent. And it's very specific to the temperament we're born into and how we use that temperament to survive and how we use that temperament to relate to others and how we use that temperament to build a satisfactory life as much as possible. So that's a little summary of this thing called the Enneagram. It's an incredible study of personality. There's lots of different ways of looking at personality out there. There's lots of different systems, like there's Myers-Briggs that looks at behavior. There's something called the Big Five Factor Model that was designed in part by Jordan Peterson that talks about 5 key traits in people's personality. And all of that lays on top of the Enneagram. We can fold it into the Enneagram. In all of my study, the Enneagram is by far the most comprehensive understanding of both the spiritual and the physical, neurological aspects of a human being. And it is really a beautiful path for development. It's not just, okay, hi, Suzanne, I'm a type 1 in the Enneagram. I'm a reformer. I'm a crusader. Well, what am I going to do with that? How can I expand into being the highest qualities of those qualities in myself? How can I not just be the person that gets angry when the chairs aren't set up at a party? How can I be more than that? And that's what the Enneagram helps us to do.
I think that's a really beautiful way to simplify such a complex topic. So thank you so much on explaining the different types from 1 through 9. Is it possible for somebody to be more than one of the types on the Enneagram, or is it mainly like someone fits into one for most of the traits and qualities?
Such a great question. The way that I've studied the Enneagram, and as much as I've gotten into the physiology of the Enneagram types, the physiology of personality, it is my belief that we really are dominant in one particular self-organizing system. However, we can relate to all 9 because we are part of the human condition, and we are all part of a whole called humanity. So we can relate to all these different aspects of being. There's no doubt. And we do share common qualities and traits, but the way that I'm actually organized from the deepest part of myself, it really does drive from one of these extraordinary personality structures. And again, structure refers to the spiritual qualities, the emotional qualities, and the neurophysiological qualities of the type. So one of them really does hold the way I suffer myself the most, basically. And one of them really does hold some of my most precious talents and gifts, my natural aptitudes. But I will be able to relate to all of them. 3 of them, however, will be very, very notable in my system. 3 of them, because one of them will represent kind of my head center, one of them will hold my heart center, and one of them will hold my gut center. So it's a triadic system, and the Enneagram is based on something called the law of 3. So you're going to see 3 types in you operating. One of them is dominant. And that gets a little bit more complicated, but there's these different triangles in the Enneagram that help us understand what our mind could do, what our heart could do, and what our gut system, our grounding system in the gut center of intelligence will do in any given point in time. And that's something that you would learn. If you came to study the Enneagram, you would learn those 3 intelligences: head center of intelligence, heart center of intelligence, and what's called gut or body center of intelligence. It's almost like, they used to call it 3 brains, but 3 processing centers actually in a human being. We all know about the processing center up here, but we actually have intelligence around the heart. The heart has its own central nervous system. The heart is receiving data, a particular kind of data. Just like our head is working with particular kinds of logic, our heart's working with its own logic and its own data. And our gut and body is also working on certain incoming data from the environment. Particularly, it'll say in the gut, my dignity, my autonomy, I matter because I exist. It gives us our grounding. That's in the gut center. I'm either going to be open and receptive or closed and defended. That's kind of happening at the gut center. I'm safe, I'm not safe. I'm going to stand for myself or I'm going to pull back. That's in the gut center. It's that kind of knowing of where I stand and what I need to do in this moment to take care of myself. It's where all my boundaries are sitting too. That's in the gut. So those 3 centers play a big role in understanding the Enneagram.
That's incredible. It's good to know, because I think a lot of times we are more than one. I like how you said that we are more dominant in one. And then we can have different qualities from the different types of Enneagrams as well. How can someone find out what type of personality they are on the Enneagram scale?
Mm, that's another great question. I co-wrote a book with Dr. David Daniels of Stanford University. This is his first book. This book has what I consider to be the best Enneagram test. It's the only test where you actually read 9 paragraphs and you see yourself in one of them that most resonates with you. You seeing yourself and relating to these 9 different descriptions. I think that's the most powerful way to do it. The process of understanding our Enneagram type is really an inside job. It's me seeing myself in the system is extremely powerful. So this is number one. I'd recommend this book. The second way is to actually meet with an Enneagram specialist that has a lot of experience in interviewing and discussing Enneagram with someone and allowing the type to be highlighted during the discussion. And the type, our Enneagram type will reveal itself in our language, in our body language, in the way we focus our attention, what we find important to talk about. What really irritates us is a really good way to ask to locate your focus, your attention, and what triggers us, where our sensitivities are, and how we suffer ourselves. And what I mean by that is, like, I'm a type 1 on the Enneagram, so I'm a reformer, crusader. So I shoot for what could be, and then it goes to what should be, and then I get angry. And
Mhm.
to walk around angry all the time because the world is not the way it should be is a lot of energy, right? So I suffer that. I suffer being frustrated or agitated that, oh, the dishes aren't clean and that tree just fell down and I need to do this. And it's like constantly wanting to fix the world. And so learning about how I'm suffering that gift and talent, because wanting to fix things is a wonderful quality, makes me very productive. But the anger underneath that is pretty hard on my system. How I suffer myself comes out in these interviews. A good interview will highlight how a person is actually suffering inside themselves, and that Enneagram specialist can help someone guide them to learn about this type. Gee, I think from our interview process, I'm really hearing a lot of the qualities of type 1 or type 6, or why don't you go read about that and see if that resonates for you, and then discuss those different types with the person. It's a great way to accelerate understanding the system and then applying it to yourself as with somebody that really understands the system. The key is finding someone that has enough experience to do that. And not a lot of people have enough experience to accurately help someone find their type, but a lot of people do. So that's another way to do it. There's a lot of tests online that use what's called a Likert scale. They ask you questions, 60 questions, 100 questions, 50 questions. They're fun and they're a great way to start asking yourself questions about what's going on the inside of you. But I have found them to be highly inaccurate oftentimes at actually helping someone accurately self-type, because one is you can only answer the questions to the best of your ability to understand the questions worded. Sometimes we answer the question more on who we'd like to be rather than what's really going on here. So we have to really know ourselves. And those questions are out of context. If it says, do you like things to be right? My answer might be, well, it depends on what's the situation. Do I want something to be right? If it's this situation, yes. If this situation, no. And these tests can't get that all these nuances and all the different contexts that would influence my answer. They can skew the results quite a bit. So I would only take an online test for fun. It's a fast way to have the system tell you what type you are. It takes away a lot of your own self-discovery, which is really important.
Really great advice. Thank you for sharing that. Can you explain to us how we can apply the Enneagram into personal relationships and how we can create successful relationships, but also unhealthy relationships based on the Enneagram scale?
Wow. So that's the $1,000,000 question. And so Dr. David Daniels, he's now passed away at the end of his life. He wanted to leave a book about the Enneagram relationships in the world that I ended up co-authoring with him. And in this book, we talk about Enneagram types in relationship with one another. And David Daniels was so passionate, as am I, about the fact that the damage, the injury, the hurt that we experience starting early in life, it happens in relationship. It starts with in relationship with our parents, in relationship with our school teachers, and in relationship with the fellow students we go to school with. It's in relationship that we get hurt. Starts primarily with our parents. God bless them, because our parents did the best they could, but there's always needs that are unmet in our parent-child relationships. But we get injured in relationship, but we also heal in relationship to each other. And of course, we grow up, we become an adult, and we fall in love for the first time and fall in love for the second time. We're actually trying to be loved. In the moment we try to be loved or we try to love another person, our Enneagram type comes right up and is what we're using. And then, of course, how healthy that Enneagram type is, meaning, is that Enneagram type balanced? Is it flexible, or is it very rigid, and is it out of balance? How much wounding have I suffered? How much trauma did I suffer? How much emotional abuse did I suffer? How much neglect did I suffer? How much shame am I carrying? How much rage am I carrying? So all of these things affect the health of those 9 types. So, for example, I could be a really healthy type 1 who just wants to bring my tendency to want to fix things. I can bring that to people. I can be writing good rules and regulations. I can be cleaning the world and making it beautiful, or I can be angry, rigid, punitive, scolding, pointing the finger at everybody that did something wrong. That's type 1 at a high level and type 1 at a low level. And when we're at a low level of development, all 9 types, we pretty much, we're hurting ourselves a lot, and we will hurt other people. And realizing where I am as far as my level of health, my level of expansion, my level of potential, my level of developmental well-being is what David and I called it. What's my level of developmental well-being? How often in a day am I triggered? Am I irritated? Am I agitated? Am I frustrated? Or am I just despondent and despairing, feeling shameful? How often in a given day am I relaxed and in a state of contentment and ease, and I'm contributing and I'm having nice conversations with people and it's a good exchange? How often in a day am I triggered? How long do I stay upset? What's the intensity of the upset? And then how long does it take me to recover? These are critical questions to start understanding the functioning of my personality and how I might be impacting other people. To go into relationships now, we get into a relationship with another. We want to be loved by someone. We want them to love us. Up comes my Enneagram types, and up comes how unhealthy it might be. Because there's nothing more vulnerable than trying to be loved by somebody else, right? There's nothing more vulnerable than entering into an intimate relationship in particular and hoping to be loved and trying to feel worthy, trying to feel lovable, making sure I'm lovable, making sure that this other person loves me. And it starts all kinds of any insecurity that we've had growing up. We're going to put that on the partner because we want them to fix all of that. And this is where it gets really complicated. So the less healthy someone is, the more the other person is going to have to be the answer to their pain. And this is where relationships get really hard. We don't know that we're doing that. We really think that it's all the other person's fault, that we feel bad. You made me feel bad. You didn't do what you said you were going to do. You went out too late and you stayed out too late. You weren't there for me. I mean, these are all the things we start to feel or we start to project on the other person. The least healthy person in the relationship will actually start to have quite a bit of control over the relationship because they have more limits. They have less flexibility. They have more rigidity. They become fearful or anxious more easily. They become angered more easily. They get triggered more easily. So if you have a disparity in how healthy the two of you are, there's a lot of conflict. The person that's a little bit healthier kind of gets exasperated and exhausted. And the person that's less healthy is stressed and anxious and frustrated and probably trying to control. So you have this imbalance. Does that seem familiar to you at all in your life and being in relationship?
Yeah, absolutely. I can totally relate. In my most recent relationship, I don't like to label things, but my ex had a lot of narcissistic traits. And that was also the problem because it was really hard to balance. It was either he was always on edge. Some days it was like totally to the top. Like when things were good, they were good. But when things were bad, they were bad. And there was no middle balance at all.
Yeah. So, boy, you shared a lot of really tender stuff. And I just want to highlight narcissistic traits. This is so popular, right, all over the internet right now, the narcissist. And in the Enneagram, we work with narcissism or narcissistic traits is someone who has been wounded. There's definitely developmental wounding that happened in childhood. The debate is out, and I just want everybody to know I'm not a psychotherapist or I'm not a psychologist. I'm an Enneagram specialist, but in our way of looking at it, there's wounding in childhood, and there's probably some temperamental fragility that that highlighted the way the person wounded. A temperamental fragility of some kind mixed with an environment that was traumatizing, and you end up with a narcissistically organized defense system. So the way the person defended itself from the pain it was suffering in early childhood is a narcissistic defense system. So it overemphasizes the self to cover for deep insecurities about self, but the solution to this person was to like become grandiose or overconfident or highly defended around any type of vulnerability. But what happens in a case like this is that the person is very sensitive to fault, very sensitive to having anything attack the image they're trying to hold up, that they're trying so hard to hold up. And they're actually very fragile. So very easily triggered. It doesn't take much. It can be very over possessive, over controlling, with a lot of anxiety, a lot of paranoia. I'm just thinking right now out loud about a case that's very popular right now on the internet, which is the Gabby Petito case. This was a case of a young woman, 20 years old, with her boyfriend. I think he was also the same age. She wanted to become an influencer, and they were going to drive a van all across the beautiful sites in America and film it and put it on the internet. But this was a relationship that was in trouble. We have a young man who has a very low level of development, probably displaying many of the narcissistic traits that are now popularized, a very insecure young man with very high levels of anxiety about who he is and what he's able to accomplish in the world. And then we have a young woman who's a real go-getter, excited about life, very loving, a tendency to want to prevent others from feeling pain. She's over-nurturing, over-caretaking, even after he's extremely mean to her. So this case has been very popularized now, but there's great disparity in the health of these two personalities. And it ended very tragically. But what happens in a case like this is the level of development of this young man. Now, he doesn't know that he's abusive or mean or difficult. It's very hard for somebody whose personality isn't functioning very well to recognize that their personality isn't functioning very well. They're just trying to survive their pain, right? And oftentimes there's a high anxiety and a high inferiority, but it acts its way out as becoming over controlling, over possessive, demanding, and really wants to almost isolate the partner so they can keep them all to themselves because fear is so high that they'll be left. Does this make sense? This is where a relationship can become very, very toxic when there are quote unquote narcissistic traits in the field in one of the persons. Narcissistic traits is a profound insecurity with lots of anxiety, grandiosity, and a tendency to want to control everything around them so they can't ever get hurt again. Does this sound familiar?
Everything you said.
Yeah.
Everything you said just sounds so familiar. Like it literally just takes me back to that relationship. I can relate. It was always that person that is a go-getter. I want to do things. I want to travel and do something and make a career for myself. And then the person that I was in the relationship with was constantly jealous. He was constantly living in fear. it was really unhealthy because he was constantly putting me down and saying mean things to me. So I can completely agree and relate with that. Even if somebody was in a relationship with somebody like that and they did like a personality test on the Enneagram scale, I feel like a lot of things would just come off so off because that person who has narcissistic traits wouldn't even be telling the truth on it. And I think that's kind of scary too.
Mm-hmm. That's a really great point you bring up. These tests will only try to identify characteristics or trait that are in the personality as an overall statement. It has no way of measuring level of developmental well-being. So I kind of envision the Enneagram as like a pancake right here. The Enneagram symbol, the circle is like this. And then we have all the 9 types going around the circle. But then you have type 1 could be high development or low development, right? Type 2 could be high development or low development. When you get any one of these types down in the low development spectrum, I worked with Enneagram Prison Project for several years, teaching the Enneagram in the prison system. And many of the people in prison are very low developmental well-being, meaning they were a type 8, but they're at, I'm going to call it the bottom of type 8, very contracted in type 8, very fearful, very dominant, very aggressive. And they're pretty much in defense. The personality is on defense 24 hours a day. And when you get somebody who's healthy, a developmentally healthy, potentiated, expanded, and integrated aspect, so the personality is well integrated, meaning what upsets me and what makes me happy is well integrated, and I'm kind of in balance. This person gets triggered maybe once a week. So this person is triggered and defended 24 hours a day. Someone who's healthy maybe gets thrown off balance and dysregulated moderately, but once a week. But also, if they do get triggered, they immediately recognize they've been triggered. They could step back and take a look at what's happened. They can renegotiate their dysregulation. They're very conscious of it. They're very aware. It's completely different. Someone who's low developmental well-being isn't aware they've been triggered. It's just the way it is, and they're right for feeling that way, and they'll defend that behavior without any conscious awareness. So going to what you just said, when somebody's in this low development place, they're fearful, they're anxious, they're defended. Usually there's a very profound toxic shame underneath everything. They don't feel they can keep you. They don't feel that you will ever stay with them. This is in the subconscious, but what's one of the ways to counteract that horrible fear? Put you down, make you feel less, try to get you so you won't leave them, that you're lucky to be in any relationship. This gets really toxic and very insidious and very, very hard to deal with, but this is one of the things that's common that happens. And then in this Gabby Petito case, it's now very famous. He was constantly putting her down. Your blog is stupid. You're never going to search. You're never going to make it. That website is ugly. Why are you spending so much time working? Why don't you just want to be with me? Yeah. So this is what happens when you have someone low development who doesn't have a good sense of themselves. There's so much anxiety in the system and such fear in the system, and oftentimes repressed rage from how they were injured as a child that never got processed. They never had a voice. Children don't have a voice with their parents. You know, if you're beaten, what are you going to do? Tell them not to beat you? You're going to get beaten more, you know? So there's a lot of children that are full of rage for having been hurt or violated and never having a way to be processed or soothed. The person that's supposed to love me harms me. Now what do you do when you're a little 3-year-old child? You have no voice. So a lot of rage builds up in the system. That rage comes out when we're in a relationship later on. It's trying to save itself all the time. But let me ask you this. You have these moments of being criticized and attacked and put down, but then there's also probably moments that were really nice and kind and where things seem to be good. Is that true?
I don't remember anything good. I remember when my ex and I were splitting up and he was like, I only remember the good moments. And I looked at him, I was like, I can't think of one. I can't think of one. What are you talking about?
You were actually really aware that this was toxic for you. Like you were really conscious of that, it sounds like.
It was hard for me to understand at first because it was something I was unfamiliar with. I was so naive to the point where I've never heard the word narcissism. I've never heard the word emotionally unavailable. I've never heard those kinds of things. I was just always being my naive self, thinking if I'm nice to people, they'll be nice to me back. And I think it was, he was nice to a certain extent the first 2-3 months, but after that it was complete switch, 360 immediately.
Yeah.
And something that I just wanted to ask you is, why do naive and innocent people attract those kinds of people who have really high anxiety or have narcissistic traits?
Oh, such a great question. Again, these are such great questions. So first, I'll just mention that the first 3 months is really nice. You know, all humans, even the men that I worked with in prison that have killed people, they all are looking for love. They're looking for good things. They're looking to feel happy. They're trying so hard to have something feel right in their life. And they'll have moments where they will smile or have a nice conversation, or they had plenty of moments in their life where they thought they were falling in love with somebody and they would bring flowers and they would be in the best possible part of themselves that they could ever find. And they can have moments like this where they seem to be rational. They'll have moments where they tell you, I just love you so much. That's why. I just care about you so much. That's why. There's moments where you get this kind of exchange with someone who is at a low development. But what happens is they don't have the psychological or emotional framework to sustain that. Even though they might want to, even though they want to see themselves as a good person, they can't see that their behavior is toxic, damaging, abusive, violent, cruel, emotionally unavailable. They can't see any of that. And this is what gets so confusing for all of us in relationships is we have these really sweet moments where it seems normal, and then boom, then out comes the defense system, and depending on how intense their defense system is, how often it shows up, how easily it gets triggered, the frequency of it, you might end up 3 months later living with a defense system rather than that kind person you met 4 months ago. Now, why do really nice people end up in these situations? And it's not what you're going to think. Here's what I've heard over and over again all my life, because I'm a type 1. Oh, you get into these relationships because you just want to fix somebody. That's a very common term. Oh, that's why you just like to find broken relationships. But actually what happens is really nice, caring people that take responsibility for their behavior, that are very high conscientious, highly agreeable, wanting to just make everything nice, just like this beautiful girl named Gabby Petito. She's nurturing. She's got this boyfriend that's constantly depressed and he's down on himself, and she tries to cheer him up. Oh no, I love you. It's okay. Don't feel bad. Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, I talked back to you. Or like she talked back to him because he was abusing her for like an hour, and she talked back, and then she'd be apologizing for having raised her voice. So this is the over nurturing. What happens is you had 3 months of this nice relationship, and then month 4, something happened, and it was bad, and it was shocking. At that moment, this is where the critical difference happened. You stayed. You didn't leave. The moment it switches, the nurturing, kind, over-responsible, highly agreeable, highly conscientious person blames himself. Oh, maybe I could have done that differently. Oh, I'm the one that upset him. Oh, no, I'll iron it better next time. That's what happens instead of the person who is very sovereign, has a different temperament, might say, what the hell was that? Hey, I'm not going to put up with that, and leaves. That's what makes the difference. That's why it's not that you attract that necessarily. I will say nice, kind people transmit nice kindness. And someone who has bad behavior feel safer with someone who's kind. Someone with bad behavior, with a bad personality, rubs up against a lot of people very easily. But the one that's kind and sweet is what they'll gravitate toward because they're safer. And the moment they behave badly, the highly conscientious, agreeable person blames himself and stays. And the relationship doesn't end when it should.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's all such great valuable advice and such great perspective as well. Because I think somebody like myself, I struggled with that for a while. It's also one of those things where it's like you're scared to leave because you're like, no, well, when the moments are good, they're good. But like when they're bad, they're bad. But then you try to think about, as like the naive person, you try to think about the good. And then, but it's also conflicting thought because it's scary. You're like, well, I don't want them to hurt me, so I'm gonna stay as well. That's also really valid.
So by the time you are in a relationship with someone and you fear that they will harm you if you get out, so you're dealing with someone that's very low level of development, high anxiety, high fear, high inferiority, very controlling. It's called coercive control that they will call, I just care about you. But actually, they're trying to control where you go, what you do, who you talk to, right? It's called coercive control. When you're with someone, you fear that getting out will cause you harm, you're in a very toxic situation. And a lot of us don't know that, right? We start, oh, I don't want to hurt them. And oh, they're going to be so devastated when I leave. And all that over nurturing of someone that is completely split or fragmented inside of themselves. But it is a real fear.
Yeah.
I want you to know it is a real fear. Gabby Petito lost her life because she was ongoing with someone at this level of development and she didn't get out. And the moment she was started talking about getting out is when she lost her life. It's just heartbreaking. So this is a very real domestic abuse, domestic violence, domestic terror is something that is very real when a human being has been damaged so greatly in childhood, they really are not functioning emotionally at all. They can appear, they kind of are functioning, and they can sometimes come into a better part of themselves, give you flowers, apologize, I'll never do that again, and let's go have fun. They can be that person for a little while, but it's not sustainable. And I think of one message is to share to everyone is to really learn about level of developmental well-being, to understand what a fragmented personality looks like, how inconsistent it is. You'll get these big moments of awfulness. You'll also get good moments. Both are happening, but the bad moments are toxic and will destroy the relationship over and over again and ultimately destroy your life. So we have to be very observant of who we're with and what's happening and really be honest with ourselves and study level of developmental well-being, not just personality traits, but how healthy is that personality, the critical study when getting into a relationship with someone and staying in a relationship with someone.
That's amazing. Thank you so much for sharing all of that. I think it's going to help a lot of people and bring a lot of awareness and education to others about these kinds of situations and these kinds of people. So it's been incredible. Before we go ahead and wrap things up, is there any last piece of advice that you'd like to share with the audience?
Yeah, I'll share that my book with David on the Enneagram relationships and intimacy is the name of it, and it's in bookstores now, and it just came out in its second edition, and it talks about level of developmental well-being very thoroughly in this book, talks about all 9 types in this book. It actually has a section on sexuality in the 9 types because we kind of even focus on different things sexually when we're these different types. So I would recommend that book for your audience and for your readers. But I would also say the most important thing we could ever do is to understand who we are and understand our own level of pain. Like what's the pain I still carry that is an obstacle to my loving someone else and to my feeling I'm worthy of love. That's a work of a lifetime. It's the most valuable thing we can ever do for ourselves, for our future or current partners, and particularly for our children. Our children are depending on us doing our work to know who we are, to know our defense system, to be able to regulate our anger so that we don't continue to create human beings on this planet that are so hurt inside that they can't love and be loved when they become adults.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Suzanne, for everything. Where can people find you and where can they stay in touch with you?
So please go. I've got a website, SuzanneDion.com, and also DrDavidDaniels.com is two websites that are full of Enneagram information. And on DrDavidDaniels.com, you'll find the books, and you'll find incisive reading about each one of the 9 types, and it'll be a great place to go.
Amazing. Thank you so much for everything. And I'll have your links linked down in the description below so people can stay in touch. Thank you, Suzanne.
Thank you so much for having me.
Hey, everyone. Thank you so much for tuning into another episode of Nourished Inside Out. I'm so thankful that you're here. Your support means so much, and I'm so excited to bring to you our very first Nourished Inside Out live virtual summit on April 26th and 27th. We have an incredible lineup of speakers, and pre-sale for tickets will be for a limited time. You can find the link in the show notes below for more information. See you there, and as always, keep growing and thriving.